Hey, welcome to Marketplace Tech Bytes, our weekly review with some of the big stories making headlines in the industry. I'm Megan McCarty-Carino. This week, X relies on money from advertisers, so why is it going to war against them? Instagram left up abusive attacks on women lawmakers. And Uber versus DoorDash, who is leading the food delivery race? I'm joined by our regular guest, Anita Ramaswamy, columnist for The Information, for her take on all these stories. Welcome, Anita.
Hey, Megan.
And as always, we're going to start with our Byte of the Week. This is a number that gives us a little insight into the week that was in tech. Anita, what's your number this week?
My number is $2 billion, and that's $2 billion in ad revenue, which is how much the social media platform X, run by Elon Musk, is expected to make this year. It's a little less than what they were making in 2023 and 2021. So, lots ahead to discuss on that.
All right, and we'll get more into the nitty gritty of some of those numbers. But first, let's talk about kind of the big headline here with X, kind of doubling down on a lawsuit against a coalition of advertisers. It includes companies like CVS, Mars, Unilever. What is X alleging here?
So what X is alleging is that these advertisers unfairly coordinated against the social media platform to basically withhold advertising dollars. The suit is being filed on antitrust grounds. So essentially saying that because of the coordination, that Twitter or X was unfairly discriminated against.
And as you noted, X revenues from advertising have been dropping. It looks like pretty precipitously. Axios this week delivering that $2 billion number down from $2.5 billion last year and $4.5 billion in 2021, the last full year before Elon Musk bought the platform. What has been going on with advertising on the site? There have been some changes to content moderation that have made it a little bit less friendly to advertisers, right?
Yeah, that's definitely one piece of it. Ever since Elon Musk took over the platform, he's been embroiled in a lot of controversy. He took it over in October 2022, and some of what he's been doing includes reinstating the accounts of some white supremacists who were banned on the platform, some conspiracy theorists. He's also amplified some anti-Semitic content. He's spread some misinformation about the election, and advertisers are really not too happy with all of this. One moment that some listeners might remember was last November at the New York Times Summit. Elon Musk got up on stage and he was asked about why advertisers are leaving the platform in such huge numbers. And he actually had an expletive for them. He told them to go F themselves if they had left.
Right. Yeah, definitely a way to attract advertising and not alienate advertising. I mean, of course, Elon Musk, he did kind of, when he took over at that time, Twitter was always ambivalent about the advertising model, wanted to move more to a kind of subscription model, with the, Twitter Premium. How has that gone? I mean, it seems like still pretty reliant on advertising.
Yeah, they are really heavily reliant on advertising, and it's really tough to convince people to pay money for a social media service that has actually been free historically. I think with the change to how users are verified, a lot of people were upset about that. Before, it used to be based on sort of the content moderation team thinking about the merit of the person who's posting, are they a public figure? Are they an academic? Are they a journalist? Whereas now it's sort of, you can just pay to get the blue check. And I know that, that wasn't as well received as perhaps Elon Musk would have liked. And I think one interesting part about this lawsuit in particular is that, Elon Musk has a ton of money to throw at this problem. And GARM, which is the division that he's actually suing, shut down last week. And they told their members that they can't afford to fight him in court.
Right. And this week in an interview with Axios, ex-CEO Linda Yaccarino kind of restating that they are still committed to this lawsuit, despite this group shutting down. All right, now let's go on to some potentially abusive content on a different social media platform. A new report out this week from the nonprofit Center for Countering Digital Hate found that Instagram failed to remove comments flagged as abusive that were made on accounts of 10 prominent female politicians, including the Democratic nominee for president, Vice President Kamala Harris. What did you take away from this research?
Content moderation at tech platforms is really lacking in general, and it's also a really tough problem. On one hand, it costs a lot of money for these social media platforms to crack down. They have to sift through millions of different comments and make sure that, they're being addressed properly. At the same time, these tech companies say that they have all this advanced technology to be able to do moderation, and it's really disappointing. At least I personally found it disappointing that, what the study found was that 93% of the comments that they looked at were abusive. That means that they included some language that was very clearly racist, clearly sexist, or clearly threatening towards women. And 93% of those comments were still viewable 1 week after they were reported and flagged to the company for takedown.
Right. They had used some, kind of text analysis to pick out the 1,000 comments that they deemed the most likely to violate, Meta's terms of service, and, found that 926 out of the 1,000 kind of remained after the group flagged these comments for takedown. What has Meta said about their response to this?
Meta has been in hot water a lot about their content moderation policies, as a lot of social media platforms have. One other big area of concern is how Meta is, sort of protecting children and the safety of kids on the platform. I think, like I said, it's difficult, but Meta's, they continue to reiterate that they're doing the best that they can, that they are trying their best to prohibit against these credible threats that are very much against their own social media use policy. At the same time, it just seems like there is sort of a disconnect as to what's happening in reality versus what, Meta is saying that they're putting their best efforts towards doing.
This is striking to me because Instagram has sort of stood in contrast to, I think, other social media platforms, particularly X, in terms of kind of the good vibes on Instagram and how friendly it makes it to advertisers. Does this seem surprising to you that, that particularly Instagram is having this problem?
Yeah, it's counterintuitive in a way because Instagram isn't the first platform you think of when you think of political content. We even saw Meta come out with the Threads app recently, which was directly supposed to be a competitor to Twitter. And it was supposed to be devoid of like this political or controversial content and not really a place where people go to discuss things like the election. The platform Instagram in particular, they say that they allow this more generally broad or stronger, more robust conversation around public figures. But it's also a question of, where do you draw the line? And at what point do those comments go from just, discourse that happens in a democracy to something that needs to be taken down from the platform? And it's a really weird position for Instagram in particular to be in, because I think a lot of people think of them as the kind of platform that you log on to, like, I don't know, go see your favorite influencers or celebrities or buy a pair of shoes or something like that. And, really they are actually important and a place where a lot of political speech happens.
Now I want to move on to a story that you wrote for the Information about the kind of food fight between DoorDash and Uber Eats to dominate the delivery game. DoorDash has, of course, been kind of the biggest player in this space, but you write that Uber might be kind of undervalued. Why do you say that?
Yeah, so this has been a really bitter fight between all these different food delivery platforms, which really heated up during the pandemic as everyone was sitting at home and ordering food. DoorDash is by far the biggest in terms of market share, at least in the US. Uber has a little bit more of a global presence. And of course, Uber started out their business more in the rideshare category. But what they've really done is they've grown a lot in the Uber Eats segment. And they are kind of coming for DoorDash's throne, in the sense that both companies report some metrics that give you an indication of what the order volume is on their platform. Generally speaking, what's the order volume and dollar value of how much people are ordering on the platform. And for Uber, that has actually been growing very fast in recent quarters, whereas for DoorDash, that rate of growth has slowed down. So what that suggests to me is that Uber is getting more traction with their delivery. More people are ordering on Uber Eats, people are ordering more on Uber Eats, they're ordering higher value kind of items. It's also growing at DoorDash too, but it's growing a lot more slowly. And so DoorDash kind of seems to be losing a little bit of ground to the disruptor, which in this case is Uber Eats.
Yeah, and you write that DoorDash at this point in its kind of growth cycle is really relying on just like squeezing out more efficiencies in what is a pretty low margin business of food delivery. And there's kind of a limit there, right?
Yeah. So the funny thing that I came across when I was reading and like talking to people about these efficiencies is that what it usually entails is clustering a lot of orders in one place. So if you have more restaurants on the platform in any given zip code, then your drivers can complete more orders in a shorter amount of time. And so it's this strange dynamic where, in some sense, you kind of are putting more work on the drivers. And some of my sources, who I had quoted in the piece, were talking about how that's effectively a pay cut for the drivers. So I do also want to give that caveat that, Uber is growing really fast. They have been able to be more efficient. But, at some point, it's possible that both these platforms will experience some sort of backlash from drivers who are saying, hey, we're doing more work in the same amount of time. Is that really fair?
Uber's business is also interesting in that it is diversified. They don't do just food delivery. This was obviously kind of a problem for Uber during the pandemic when the rideshare business was not doing very well. So Uber invested more in its food delivery business, buying Postmates for $2.65 billion. Now the rideshare business is kind of a benefit for its food delivery, right?
Yeah, so that is part of what allows Uber to unlock those efficiencies that I was talking about, just sort of having more services that are clustered in the same place. But at the same time, it really insulates them from the idea that what happens if we have a huge downturn in consumer spending and food in particular gets hit really hard, or rideshare in particular gets hit really hard. They just sort of have more room to hedge one versus the other. The other component is that both of these companies are cramming a lot of ads into their platforms. And so that's another source of revenue growth that I don't feel is particularly sustainable.
That being said, Uber has its eye on potentially another acquisition in its future. You write they're looking at Instacart.
Yeah, I actually don't know if they are looking at Instacart, but I certainly think they should be. It's really been a fast growing delivery platform for groceries, and Instacart has historically played only in that space. But Uber and Instacart came up with a partnership recently, a couple of months ago, where you can basically go on the Instacart app and you can order Uber Eats food like from a restaurant using Instacart. So it gave Uber Eats this access to a suburban customer. Uber has historically been really successful in more densely populated cities. Instacart has been more popular in the suburbs. And so the two of them have come together already in this partnership. And Uber has the money to be able to buy Instacart. So I think, it should be something the executives are thinking about.
I feel like they do have a challenge in that Uber as a verb is pretty clearly describing the rideshare business. And DoorDash is kind of the verb for food delivery. It's sort of the default. Yeah. All right. Thanks, Anita. That's Anita Ramaswamy, financial analysis columnist for The Information. Good to have you.
Thanks, Megan. It was great being here.
And thanks to all of you for joining Marketplace Tech Bytes Week in Review. Rosie Hughes produced this episode, and I'm Megan McCarty-Carino. This is APM.